Good stuff.
Hi. I'm ready. We go together. Good morning. Okay, it's past time to start here. And I would blame it on somebody else, but it's my fault, so. We had about 7 grandkids at the house this morning, and it seemed like 15, so we're getting going. Chuck, would you shut those doors, please? Okay, so this morning we're in 2 Kings chapter 5. We're going to talk about Naaman. All right, let's have a prayer. Father, we're grateful for the day, and we're thankful for everyone who's here this morning, for those who are here on a regular basis and those who are visiting with us. And we just pray that you'd bless our class this morning. May we learn those truths from your word that will inspire us and help us to be stronger disciples of you. Just bless us through this class, we ask in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so the story of Naaman, or let me start over here. We've been talking about outsiders in the Bible. We talked about Rahab. Was it Abimelech you did, Ted? And we did the one I taught. Ruth. Yeah. And we've done one other one.
Yeah, Elijah.
Elijah. Oh, the Shunammite woman? Yeah. Okay. Is that right? No. Okay, I get those mixed up. Okay, anyway, this morning we're going to talk about Naaman and Elisha. And I forgot one thing, which is normal for me. I forgot to put the questions up here that we want to think about as we think about outsiders. Why is the outsider drawn to God? I'd say the first question would be, who is the outsider in the story? The second thing is, why is the outsider drawn to God? What role does the believer play in the outsider's encounter with God? And then, what does this story teach us about our own experiences with non-believers? So kind of keep those questions in the back of your head as we go through the story this morning. So let's start in chapter 5 of 2 Kings, and we'll read the first 5.5 verses. So Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man and in high favor with his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. The man, though a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. Now the Arameans on one of their raids had taken a young girl captive from the land of Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his Lord just what the girl from the land of Israel had said. And the king of Aram said, "Go then, and I will send along a letter to the king of Israel." So the first thing I guess we need to know is, where is Aram? And Aram is right there, north of Israel. And Aram and Syria are used interchangeably. Some of your versions may say Syria, but they're used interchangeably within the text. And Damascus was its capital, as you can see up there. It was inhabited by the Arameans, where it gets its name, a group of people that migrated from the Syrian desert. And it can refer to that area specifically around Damascus, or a broader geographical area. And the first question I had as I was reading the text the other day was, it says God was, because the Lord had given victory to Aram. Let's see. Because by him the Lord had given, that is Naaman, had given victory to Aram. So do you think Naaman was aware of the fact that God was using him? Which would be an interesting question. And okay, how do you click this thing? I always get into trouble with this thing. Oh, I'm trying to advance the slide. Oh, it's not. Yeah, it's on. How come? There it is. So that's my question. How do you feel about Yahweh using other countries, and sometimes more wicked than Israel, to achieve his will? Is that an issue for you?
I'm for it.
You're for it?
I think it's a good idea.
Ted?
It takes different things to influence different people. And some people, they don't need any proof that God exists. What they can read for themselves, what they hear and learn, is enough to give them faith. For other people, there's no such thing as enough proof to convince them. Some people are easy, some people, like myself, are extremely hard-headed. And it takes a whole lot to change my mind, or, so because some people won't change, I think God uses them to corral Israel
Okay.
when they're off the path.
Okay. Chad?
It makes me wonder about the role of free will in God's plans. And right now we have nothing but detours around here with all the road construction. But, does God take detours or have detours in mind that, if somebody or some people or some individual doesn't cooperate, because of choices they've made, there are other routes to take to get to the same place.
Okay. And so what does this tell us about other people within our community? Can we learn from them even though they're not part of our faith or part of our group or whatever? Growing up, I was really, what's the right word? Is it provincial? Okay. Huh?
Yeah, that's a good word.
I think I learned that in Mary Poppins. I'm not sure. But I lived in a really closed community that didn't want to listen to other people. And as I've grown older, I've learned that sometimes there's some wisdom outside of our group. And so I think we need to, as Ted said, I think God's trying to wake us up sometimes. And I think that was one of the exercises that, or the ideas that we learned from the Partnership for Missional Church, was that we can learn from other people and it's okay. And so we have to just do that. Jehoram is king here of Israel. We'll get to him in just a minute. But there were some hostilities between the Arameans, King Ben-Hadad II was reigning at this time, and they and Israel were kind of in some different, having different issues. But Naaman was a mighty leader, it says, even though he suffered from leprosy. Now, I don't know what his leprosy was. I would think if it was the extreme, what they call Hansen's disease, I'm not sure he would have been able to be out in public as much as he was. But he had some kind of a skin disease that was pretty serious. And during one of their raids on Israel, they'd taken a young Israelite girl captive. And she was Naaman's wife's servant girl. She knew of Elisha somehow. The text doesn't say why. And she informed her mistress that Naaman could be healed if only he could see the prophet Elisha. So here's my question to you right now. Why are some reasons that there would be reason not to listen to the young girl? Is my question. She's the bottom of the totem pole. What do you mean, Randy?
You're lower than a slave girl.
Okay, she's a slave and a woman, a young girl. There was one other thing I thought of. Huh? Yeah, she's a foreigner. Okay. Is there anything else that you think of? Those were the three things I thought of. But she was being a witness for God by referring to Elijah. And so, have you ever had to take advice from a child? And how did it make you feel? Can you think of a specific example? I've got one grandson right now that follows me around everywhere. And whenever I start to do a project, he says, well, we could use this wrench, or we could do this, or we could do that. And I'm thinking, I can't think of the specific thing that happened the other day, but I thought, that would be an easier way to do this. I wish I'd have thought of that. And not just a child, but have you ever had to take advice from somebody that you considered, as Randy said, lower on the totem pole, not in your social standing, not in your, your economic area, somebody that you think's not as smart as you? Sylvia.
I taught honors class one year. Those kids were sharp. And sometimes we were giving a presentation before the school board, and I had the students do it, so I didn't have to. And one of the students said, sometimes we learn from Mrs. Harness, and sometimes she learns from us.
Okay.
That was very, very true.
Okay, good. One thing that I think that we have to take from that too is we have to be open to learning from people. Sometimes I even learn things from Donna, and that's a good thing. So she's working on me, or God's working on me through Donna. Anyway, Naaman informed the king that, and he sent him to the king of Israel, Jehoram, with a letter of introduction. So let's get down and read the next few verses. So at the middle of verse 5, Naaman went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of garments. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to give death or life to this man, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Just look and see how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me." So Jehoram misinterprets the letter, I think is what's going on here. I don't know how that letter was worded. We don't have that. But I find it interesting that Jehoram didn't think to consult Elisha on this. And so what that shows me is how far removed from Yahweh that the people had become, because they didn't even recognize, the king didn't recognize or think about the prophet to begin with, and said, "Oh, if I just hand this over to Elisha, things will be better." And so that just kind of shows me, at least personally, that Israel had gotten away from God quite a ways. But anyway, when you start in verse 8, when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel." So he's letting him know prophets are still around. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and halted at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became angry and went away, saying, "I thought that for me he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and would wave his hand over the spot and cure the leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" He turned and went away in a rage. But his servants approached him and said, "Father, if the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you not have done it? How much more when all he said to you was, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. His flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy, and he was clean. So instead of going himself, Elisha sends a messenger. And I wonder if by sending that messenger, Naaman felt disrespected, or felt that Elisha was a sham. He really wasn't who he was supposed to be, and he was just putting him off. And he couldn't really do what the young girl had told him he could do. So I think he was letting his pride get in the way. And I don't know, maybe he thought something so simple and so seemingly mundane and so silly could be that effective. Just go wash in the Jordan 7 times. He expected him to come and wave his hand over or rub the spot or whatever, or his flesh, and it would cure him. I got to thinking about some of Elisha's other miracles, though. Some of them were a big deal. He raised a young boy from death. But some of his miracles were very simple. If you go back to chapter 4, at the beginning of chapter 4, you have the increase of the widow's oil, and he doesn't just wave his hand over it. The widow's oil, what do you call this thing, a cruse or container, she needed oil. She needed a lot more oil. And instead he said, just go gather up some pots and start pouring and it'll increase. I mean, that's a pretty big miracle, but it's a simple way of the solution. Later on in chapter 4, you have him, some poisonous weeds get in the pot, down in verse 39 and following, or 38, when the prophets and were sitting around eating, and somebody had gathered up some bad stuff, I suppose poisoned mushrooms or something, and all he does is throw flour in it. He feeds 500 people later on, or 100 people later on in chapter 4, which really sounds a lot like the feeding of the 5,000. But he says, just go start passing it out and you'll have enough. In chapter 6, this is the story I always remember from Bible school, because there was a picture of an axe head laying in the bottom of the river, and all he did was throw a stick in and it floats to the top, and he doesn't make a big production of it. My point is, some of his miracles were pretty fantastic, or we would see them as fantastic, and all of these were fantastic miracles, but done in very simple ways. So asking Naaman to go dip in the river 7 times is, to me, sort of like a simple thing. Chad?
I kind of wonder, obviously Elisha has gotten a reputation.
Okay.
Even this slave girl knows who he is, and how many people were coming to him to say, heal me or do this, or was the messenger part just strictly kind of like administrative to say, like, he's getting so many, he can't do them all like himself, and so he had to send messengers out to, and this is just one that we see recorded, but was he just overwhelmed with requests, and so he had to kind of push some off this way?
I suppose, but I disagree. So, I don't know.
How old was he at that time?
Elisha?
Yeah,
I don't know.
maybe he was.
Oh, you mean maybe physically he
Yeah.
couldn't do it? Okay. Joy?
Maybe for lack of a better word, mundane or non-fantastical way that he did it was more about taking the emphasis off him and the act and putting it on God where it belongs.
Okay. Donna Young, is that what you?
Well, the person had to do something instead of Elisha. just
Oh, okay.
healing it. The person had to have faith and be part of it.
Okay. Good. Good observation, I think. Jay?
Does seem like a contrast back to Elijah
Yeah.
and the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, where they have to do a big show, a lot of yelling, cutting, slashing themselves.
Right.
And this is more mundane.
Okay. And it's interesting to me that his own servants convinced Naaman that he ought to go and do this. I mean, they said, look, he didn't ask you to go jump the Grand Canyon, or jump across the river. I shouldn't use the Grand Canyon. He didn't know about it then. But, he didn't ask you to do some big deal. Go wash. See, what do you got to lose? So, have you ever resisted doing something simple to achieve a desired outcome because it was not flashy or dramatic? Bill?
This is sort of answers that question about Naaman, because when I read this a couple of times. I looked at it and I said, he says he was angry and he went away, saying, hey, this is nothing, But the person that changed his mind was somebody with a different outlook, because Naaman was big. He was a commander of armies. He
Right.
was somebody. He was important, and yet a lowly servant, just one of his many servants that he probably had, said, "Hey, boss, take another look at this. Maybe it'll work."
Yeah.
So, like you said, the first question was taking advice from somebody. The second question was getting over yourself and going and doing it.
Okay.
So I think that's the same thing. Sometimes we resist because something we have to do or act, the way we have to act or something, we feel like maybe it's below our dignity or something to do that.
Okay. I was thinking of conversion experiences of different people I've heard about. I mean, I've got a really close friend that his conversion was really dramatic. And by that, I mean, it wasn't smoke and mirrors type deal or a big show, but he had to come from a family who was not believers of the Christian faith, at least in our group, and he had to break away from his entire family. I mean, he alienated himself from his family because of his belief in Jesus. Now that mellowed over time, but he really had to make a commitment. I was raised this way. It was expected. Nobody told me that, but it was expected of me that I would just follow along and be part of the group. And so my conversion experience has just been long and laborious and mundane in some ways, and yet I'm still working on it. But there's some whose conversion was really dramatic. I mean, most of us, I doubt, most of us are like Paul and meet Jesus on the road and knock us to our knees. That would be a pretty dramatic thing. So what are some reasons that we will resist trying certain things? Bill mentioned, I think, sort of not listening to people that we've already talked some about people that are less than us. What are some other reasons? Donna, Evans, what's your main thing nowadays? It's a 4-letter word. Fear. That was one thing I thought of. We're scared to try things or to do things. What? Pride. I think that was part of Naaman's problem to begin with, was pride.
I think that fear goes right along with the pride, because the ego says, I don't want to look bad. But I don't want to look bad because I'm afraid of what people will think.
Okay.
Hand in hand.
Okay. Sylvia?
Mine might be because I've had something ingrained in me, a tradition or belief from the time I was really young.
Okay.
Until now.
So what we've been taught since we were young and trying to try something different. Chad?
Change is hard, and we don't like hard things. People like doing the easy, repeatable, predictable. It's like, how many of you go to the same restaurant and order the same meal because you know you like it, even though you very well may like 4 other things on the menu, but you get the one thing that you know you like. And even if you go to a different restaurant, that's why they have chicken tenders at every restaurant, right? Because people like chicken tenders. And so it is so hard for us to work up the energy to try something else or do something outside of what kind of our comfort zone is. And to where there's even, there's whole industries of self-help and all these things, life coaches and everything else that are trying to just like push you into doing different things, and we don't like it.
Ron?
I think in the context of what he said earlier relating to younger people, as we get older, we have a sense of not doing new things or different things. We're always questioning it, and we don't listen to other people. And so it's that context as well.
Okay.
Sometimes people are just lazy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we can be lazy. That can be another reason we don't want to do something. Yeah, I don't like to talk about that. Donna?
Maybe this will connect, I'm not sure, but I was just thinking about looking up here. We have technology now, and I think sometimes we don't want to use the symbol because we don't want to be left behind, or maybe looked upon that we're not with the times or whatever, because I was thinking something as simple as using a songbook, we just no longer do very often. And it's using the songbook and seeing those words gives the same outcome. I mean, it's the same purpose, but now it seems that we need something a little bit flashier or more dramatic. We need the words up in front of us. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying maybe that's an example of right in here.
There's a word, a Luddite. You don't want to be a Luddite. You don't want to use a flip phone anymore. You have to have a smartphone. Sylvia, Billy was first. Billy?
Am I first?
Yo, you're on, Billy.
You're not as old as I am, Dennis, but in my many years of working with the post office, a lot of things I tried and they worked. When they'd assign new people to work with me, and I'd try to teach them how to do something, they'd say, that won't work.
Okay.
I said, try it and see.
Okay.
And I'll be doggone, it worked.
What do you know?
Okay. Sylvia?
I remember when we first put the songs up on the screen, how resistant several people were, or maybe more people than that.
Well, yeah, I mean, some people didn't want us to take out the pews and put in chairs. And now I can't think of doing it any differently. I mean, yeah, change.
Change is,
I'm a Luddite, so it's difficult for me.
I'm a Luddite too. Welcome to the club. Sometimes we hear people say, why would I want to do that? What's the matter with what we're doing now? This is the way we've always done it. And, talk about resistant to change.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of like that.
But in answer to Chad's question, I just don't want to try anything else. So I go to certain restaurants because they serve what I like. And so that's what I order. And I'm okay with that. All right. Let's finish the chapter. This kind of starts on a different path here. So verse 15, then he returned to the man of God. This was after Naaman was healed. Okay? Verse 14, he was clean. Then he returned to the man of God, he and all his company. He came and stood before him and said, now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Please accept a present from your servant. But he said, as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will accept nothing. He urged him to accept, but he refused. Then Naaman said, "If not, please let 2 mule loads of earth be given to your servant, for your servant will no longer offer burnt offerings or sacrifice to any god except the Lord. But may the Lord pardon your servant on one count. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, leaning on my arm, and I bow down to the house of Rimmon, when I do bow down in the house of Rimmon, may the Lord pardon your servant on this one count." And he said to him, "Go in peace." So apparently this practice of taking earth from dirt from one place and transferring it to another is not anything that's not uncommon. And so Naaman wanted to have that earth so that he could worship Yahweh on the dirt of, I guess, his sacred place or whatever. Why do you think Elisha refused the gifts? Maybe we've answered this already. Joy maybe answered it a minute ago. What did you say, Joy?
I was talking about not flashing miracles, it was
Okay.
the emphasis on God rather
Okay. And do you think maybe Elisha might not have taken these gifts for that reason, to keep the emphasis on God? Also, this kind of reminds me of a story in the New Testament. Do you think Naaman was trying to buy favor from God by offering these gifts? That was one idea I ran across. And if he was, does that remind you of a story in the New Testament? In Acts chapter 8, Simon the sorcerer wanting to buy the gift of the Holy Spirit and be able to pass that on to people. Excuse me. But I don't know whether that's what's going on or not. But at least Elisha refused. And he took this earth. By the way, Rimmon was kind of short for Hadad Rimmon, they think, who was the god of the Arameans at this time. And he's similar to Baal, the Canaanite god Baal. He was the god of storms and fertility. So, Naaman appears to be a secret believer. How do you feel about the fact that Elisha allowed him to continue to enter the house of Rimmon instead of asking him to cut off that practice completely? Okay, free will, but
I think he can act as a teacher through his actions and his experience by explaining to others how God worked through him.
so he would explain to the believers in Rimmon. Okay, all right, good. I mean, does that trouble you that he just goes ahead and enters that place? I don't know. You know, when people, I found this a little bit puzzling as a kid as I've gotten older. Not so much as a kid, but I think at times we don't give people time to grow, to disciple them. I think we expect from their conversion experience, however that takes place, and some people can just flip a switch. But I think discipleship is a lifelong deal. It's not something you just come out of the water and bang, you're full force there. Yeah, it's discipline. It takes a life of discipline and a life of learning and I think at times those of us that are more mature expect that same maturity level out of other people. I didn't expect my kids to be, well, I probably did, but I wasn't right. You don't expect your kids to act just like you do. You've had a life of learning and teaching and experiences that have raised you into something, and we need to walk alongside those people who are disciples or who have expressed interest in that. And, I asked the question to myself, what would Naaman have been risking? He would have risked a lot. And we'd say, okay, so, you have risked a lot, but guess what you gain? But sometimes that's easier said than done, I think. All right, let's, Bill?
Well, go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say very quickly that in those days, in those times, they weren't looking to specifically make converts to the God of Israel. They just wanted people to realize that the God of Israel existed.
Right.
And he did that. But he, as you say, he had obligations and he had things to do. But he's going to take that story back there and tell it to other people.
Right.
So it's not the same thing as what we do today, where we have a commitment to Jesus Christ and we're baptized and we become part of the body. That's a different situation.
Okay. So, anyway, I just wanted you to think some about that. All right. So, Elisha excuses him. He refuses the gifts. Now, we need to hurry. I didn't think we'd get this far this quick I thought we'd finish quicker. Okay. The middle of verse 19. But when Naaman had gone from him a short distance from Elisha, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, thought, my master has let the Aramean Naaman off too lightly by not accepting from him what he offered. As the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something out of him. So Gehazi went after Naaman. When Naaman saw someone running after him, he jumped down from the chariot to meet him and said, is everything all right? Notice that Naaman jumps down from his chariot. He brings himself down to his level, which he's had a change of heart. Naaman said, he replied, yes, but my master has sent me to say, 2 members of a company of prophets have just come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothing. I find it interesting that he didn't say, give me the whole enchilada. He asked for something pretty simple. So, he's being smart in a sense. Naaman said, please accept 2 talents. He urged him and tied up 2 talents of silver and 2 bags with 2 changes of clothing and gave them to the 2 servants who carried them in front of Gehazi. When he came to the citadel, he took the bags from them, stored them inside, he dismissed the men, and they left, and he got away with it, he thought. He went in and stood before his master, and Elisha said to him, where have you been, Gehazi? He answered, your servant has not gone anywhere at all. But he said to him, did I not go with you in spirit when someone left his chariot to meet you? Is this a time to accept money and to accept clothing, olive orchards and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male and female slaves? Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. So he left his presence, leprous as white as snow. So let me take back what I said about Hansen's disease, because I just caught this. He says he turned leprous as white as snow, and that's what Hansen's disease does. So maybe Naaman was that bad. I think you all get the import of this story and the end of this story, and I just think it behooves all of us to guard ourselves from getting caught in the trap that Gehazi was caught in of greed. I don't know what all else you could say. He just wanted stuff for himself. And he couldn't stand the fact that Elisha refused it. And so, let's just be careful to not get trapped. there's ways we can do that. We don't have time to ferret them all out, but you have to be on your guard. All right, you can go drink coffee or tea or whatever. We'll meet back here in a few minutes.
Okay.